and welcome to another video of The Mental Traveler. I'm Caro, and today I'm going to do a book review of 1984, written by George Orwell. Since its publication in 1949, it has been considered a well-loved classic in all the world. And now that I've read it, I can honestly say that it's famous for a reason. It's really good, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Before reading it, I had a vague idea of what it was about, but since it's not the sort of book that I usually read, I was a little skeptical about it. But there's never been a semester at college where a professor doesn't mention this book, so I thought that I should give it a try after I found out that my college library had it. So before I graduate in May, I decided to check 1984 out and see what all the fuss was about. I should warn you that this will be a video with mild spoilers, particularly in the review section. This is a dystopian novel, so it shows an alternative take on what happened to humanity after World War II, and the world that George Orwell evokes is pretty horrible. But the story deals with the following. It's the year 1984, and the world has been divided into these sections. Great Britain is now called Airstrip 1, and the whole world is always at war. There's also this new form of government in Britain, or Airstrip 1, that's often referred as a party, and this government is led by the figure of Big Brother. And everyone is always being watched, and you aren't encouraged to do or feel or say anything out of the ordinary, because then you can be arrested and executed. 1984 portrays this very toxic and sick society where it's normal for the government to watch and control everybody for every minute of their lives. And also, love isn't encouraged, and children are encouraged to denounce their parents to the authorities if they think their mom and dad are doing something that's against the law. All sense of privacy is erased, and also the government is always rewriting history to suit their current goals. And one day you may exist, and then the other one for something you did or said, or the government thinks you said or did, or just because it suits their fancy. They'll arrest you, they'll torture you and execute you, and they'll erase every single document that supports that you were ever alive. This is just an overall idea of how the government controls people in 1984. But I like the fact that George Orwell wrote this novel based on what he knew and lived through. He was alive during World War I and World War II, during the Soviet Union, during British imperialism. He does this sort of mixture of all these governments and creates the world in 1984. What the story is about is mainly Winston Smith. The novel is told from his point of view. He's a 39-year-old man that works at this government post where he rewrites pieces of history in newspapers, for example, in order for them to match the current position of the government. And he seems to be an ordinary fellow, but he isn't, because in secret he hates Big Brother and the government. He knows that what they are doing is wrong, and he remembers that when he was young, the world was different. And he secretly tries to rebel against the government, doing small deeds like keeping a diary where he writes his thoughts, or buying things people aren't allowed to have. Winston believes that this man called O'Brien, who also works at a government position, thinks like he does. But Winston isn't sure how to contact O'Brien because they're always being watched. And if they start a conversation that does not have to do with work, they will probably be discovered, and that's a risk he isn't ready to take. But then one day Winston receives a note from a female co-worker called Julia, where she tells him that she loves him. But since love isn't allowed in this world, Winston knows the risk that it would entail to start an affair with Julia. But in the end, he doesn't mind this, and neither does Julia. So they meet in secret, even though they are pretty certain that their joy can't last forever. Thus, in order to avoid being apart forever, they decide to move up against the government. And Brian comes into the picture in after this, but I won't tell you anymore because I don't want to spoil the outcome of the story for you. So go ahead and read it and make sure to let me know what you thought of it. This is a very tricky book to talk about, but I'll do my best to explain why I give it a 5 out of 5 stars rating, and why everything you've ever heard that's good about 1984, it's really true. As I mentioned earlier, before reading the book, I had no idea what it was about. I resisted my tendency to go on Wikipedia and read the ending of a book or a movie, because I love spoilers. But in any case, I decided to read this book without knowing what to expect, because I thought it would be about this whole world building and a resistance fighting against the controlling government. But in the end, 1984, although it does have a lot of world building, it's It's more of a personal approach to the individuals that live in this society. So I was pleasantly surprised to instead get this very personal story of the protagonist. And I really enjoyed Winston as a character. The way the author wrote him and his character arc and development was really interesting. I could really empathize with him because he's willing to risk everything for his ideals, even though he is uncertain that those ideals are the right thing. But he has so much gumption. He just feels in his gut that what he thinks is right. And I really admired him, and there was even a point where I thought that this renegade was invincible and stood a chance against one of the most manipulative forms of government that could ever exist. But I also enjoyed 1984 because it showed a lot of the love affair between Julia and Winston, and that was something I was really not expecting. I didn't think it would be a love story, even though it's not a conventional love story, and I honestly can't think of anything to say that's wrong about this novel. I mean, it set my mind pondering on a lot of issues about history and government and power, about how one can control a person's mind and break the spirit of a human being. And I'm sure that I've missed a lot of messages and meanings in the novel, but it's such a complex book to analyze, so I think I'll wrap up my review here. I'll just point out that the ending, I was definitely not expecting it, but it was very realistic and in tone with the book. There's also a movie adaptation of 1984 that was released in 1984, and it stars John Hurt, Richard Burton, and Samantha Hamilton. And I think the movie was almost as good as the book. The casting was fantastic. I've been a John Hurt fan ever since I saw him when I was a little girl in The Storyteller. And for example, if there was a certain scene in the book that I thought was dragging on, watching that scene played out by fantastic actors made me fall for that moment in a way that the book didn't. So I think that the movie is almost as good as a novel, and it's a magnificent adaptation, so I do encourage you to watch the movie. But since it's a very faithful adaptation, I've decided that I won't be doing a movie review of 1984. So this is it for my book review of 1984 by George Orwell. Please leave me your comments and thoughts below. If I've missed any message or meaning in the novel, please let me know about it. And in the description box you can find 3 links. One is to the Goodreads page of the novel, one is to the movies trailer, and one is to the film's IMDb page. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Caro, and I'll be seeing you soon. Goodbye.